This podcast is brought to you by Irrigation Today magazine, the only publication solely focused on on-farm irrigation. For more information, go to www.irrigationtoday.org.
Welcome to the Bring a Water Life podcast. I am John Farner with the Irrigation Association, and I'm joined by Ann Blankenbiller.
Hey, John.
How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. How are you today?
You are quarantined in Lincoln, Nebraska, huh?
No better place to be quarantined.
We'll go into what's God country and what's not God's country later on in the podcast. How's that sound? Yeah, Lincoln, Nebraska, that is a good place to be.
It is right now, the middle of the country. We're somewhat social distanced by where we're located.
Yeah. Out here in Maryland, DC suburbs, it's a little bit different atmosphere. We were just talking about that off the air, so we're both lucky and fortunate to be at home doing our jobs, while we're both in quarantine with our families and enjoying ourselves, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
For me, I've always worked at home, but
yeah,
I usually don't work at home with 4 other family members.
Well, it's weird. First of all, how has that been working at home with 4 other family members?
It's not too bad. It's just, It's a little busier and a little louder, but it's working. It's working.
Yeah. And your kids are in high school, just graduated high school?
I have 2 college girls that came home in the middle of March, and then I have one son that's in high school.
In high school. Okay. That's what it was. Okay. Well, that's good. And then your son that's in high school, is he graduating? What year in high school is he?
He's just a sophomore. So he's doing online school right now.
Yeah.
The college girls are kind of doing online school, depending on the instructor, but everybody has their own bedroom.
We can go into a full podcast about online schooling and distance learning. I feel like we have our own. I've mentioned in this podcast before, I have 3 kids at home, and it's been interesting to say the least, with 2 working parents and all 3 kids doing remote learning. And it's all a challenge. It's a challenge for the kids, for the parents, for the teachers.
The teachers, I feel for them. That would be a real hard, transition to make without any warning.
That's right. And they are trying to follow, the direction given them by the governing school district or county, whatever governs the school,
right.
the school of the area. And so it's a tough situation for everybody. And
we're all in it together.
I know. I'm excited to talk about agriculture today. The past few podcasts has been about landscaping. So I'm excited to talk about ag. And we had a pretty cool conversation with Brian Kuehl with K-Coe. K-Coe, I forget, K-Coe combined with another firm. He'll go into exactly what it is. I call it K-Coe. But he's holed up in Wyoming and gave a really good rundown of just the overall industry and agriculture and where things stand right now.
Yeah, he has a great global view of where things are and where things are headed.
Well, first of all, Ann, if people don't remember, you are editor-in-chief of Irrigation Today magazine, right?
Yes.
Which is a publication of the Irrigation Association. But you want to talk a little bit about Irrigation Today and what the magazine is and what you guys focus on?
Sure. Yeah. Irrigation Today is actually the only magazine in the market that is solely focused on-farm irrigation. So we're really kind of very unique in the industry because there's nobody else like us. And we are published 4 times a year. And we're special because all of our content is provided by industry experts. We don't have staff writers and we don't hire freelance writers. The people who are writing articles for us are people who work in the industry and are experts at what they're writing about. So we provide all kinds of information about the newest technology coming out that irrigators want to know about. You yourself provide a column about the latest legislative updates.
Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not,
Oh, it's good because
I don't know.
You can give specifics about what the Irrigation Association is working on related to that. And so many other publications are very general ag focused, and we focused on everything irrigation, which is a great resource for those that are in that industry.
I don't think there's going to be a shortage of information anytime soon, given the challenges that agriculture is facing, both in this immediate pandemic and as we all pick up the pieces moving forward, and we'll go into this a little bit with Brian in a second, but what things look like post-pandemic, which I think we are all eager to get to, right? We're all itching to get to what comes next, how to pick up the pieces, build ourselves back up. And agriculture, unfortunately, is not immune to any of this themselves. And you'd think, well, everyone needs food. Well, as we're going with Brian, it's not that easy. There's a lot of factors that started 4 years ago that affect where agriculture is today in terms of this pandemic and where things need to go in the future. By the way, before we introduce Brian, I did want to bring up, you mentioned, working from home. You're usually working from home, and I'm usually out in our Fairfax, Virginia office, and I'm here at my house right now in Frederick, Maryland. But I think I've seen our remote staff more over the past month and a half than I have the entire time we've been working together.
I know.
Video conferencing. So I think at least one benefit that comes out of this, it's thrusting organizations like ours into this area of the benefits of actually communicating with one another in person via video. And it's interesting moving forward how that's going to be in a quote unquote the new normal, post-pandemic. So,
right. Absolutely. Yeah. I've seen the Virginia staff every week.
Yeah.
Through staff meetings, and usually I see them once a quarter.
Exactly.
So, but that's wonderful. It's great. I'm glad we have this technology.
It is great. All right. So like I said, we had a great conversation with Brian. I'm excited to talk about agriculture and what it means. We talk a little bit about technology, and we'll be back after the interview with Brian Kuehl to kind of wrap things up. Sound good?
All right, here we go.
Here's Brian. Welcome, Brian. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time to join us in the podcast.
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah. So you're in Wyoming, right?
I live in the great state of Wyoming. It's a wonderful place, God's country, but I suspect most people who live in rural America say that about their hometown.
I was going to say, Ann, I thought Nebraska was God's country. I didn't
That's
know Wyoming
our motto. We have street signs that say, "Welcome to God's country." Are you trying to take that away?
I live in...
God is equal opportunity.
Brian, I live in Frederick, Maryland, which is barely a suburb of Washington, D.C. I don't know if you're familiar with my little neck of the woods or not, but compared to Washington, D.C., we say Frederick is God's country because it's just on the outskirts of being, a suburb of what you see in Washington. So that's pretty
There
cool.
you go.
Yeah. So tell me what you do, Brian. You work for K-Coe, right?
I do. So I'm a director of government and public affairs for K-Coe Isom. K-Coe Isom's national ag accounting and consulting firm. So we work with ag producers, greenhouses, nurseries, food processors, anyone in the food and ag supply chain. We work with them on everything from financial to sustainability planning. And I do the government and public affairs. So I focus on what's coming through Congress, to some degree what's happening at the state level, and then help work to make sure that policies work for agriculture.
And you and I met a few years ago at a Western Ag and Conservation Coalition meeting, if my memory serves me right. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
One of the projects I head for K-Coe, we have a subsidiary called K-Coe Conservation. Mm-hmm. And K-Coe Conservation works on habitat projects and works with landowners to help them figure out how to monetize the value of their property in terms of doing environmental projects. So we work with environmental credits. And so we met at Western Ag and Conservation Coalition meetings, and that was focusing on that topic.
Yeah, that's great. Back when Las Vegas was a vibrant, city with actually people going to visit the casinos and hotels, way back when, Brian.
Back when you could travel. I remember when you used to be able to go out to a restaurant to eat. An amazing time when I was a kid.
It seems like forever ago. This is kind of a funny story or a sad story. My wife and I woke up this morning and I had some things to do, online and social media type stuff for my day job working for the Irrigation Association. And so my daughter was awake, my wife and I are both awake, and everyone else in my house is asleep. And I was talking to my wife before she left to go to the grocery store, and she's like, when I woke up, I thought, oh, this is nice. I can have Sally come with me to the grocery store. And then I realized, no, I really can't have Sally come. It's kind of a sad, realization of the times we live in right now, Well,
when you think about the last time the three of us were together.
That's right.
Was in Kansas City eating barbecue in a crowded restaurant.
That's right.
That's hard to even fathom right now.
I know. So
Good barbecue, though.
It was great barbecue. Speaking of restaurants, Brian, let's kind of get a lay of the land first in your viewpoint on agriculture. Before we started recording, I mentioned restaurants, hotels, schools, resorts, cruise ships, they're all shut down. And these are a major customer, a major distribution channel for our agricultural producers throughout the United States. So I want to get kind of your viewpoint on where things stand right now, kind of broadly, like 30,000 foot level. And then I kind of want to dig down deep into where you see some of the solutions occurring in the various coronavirus bills that have passed through Congress and where you kind of see things going for agriculture. So let's start big picture first. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I mean, big picture, one thing that's important to recognize is that this is actually a global pandemic. So it's not just restaurants in the United States that are shut down, but restaurants in Europe, restaurants in China, restaurants around the globe. And when you think about the food and ag supply chain, we're getting hit on so many levels. It's hard to be a producer today. Number one, domestic consumption and supply chains have changed pretty dramatically. Not for everybody, certainly. There's some pieces of ag that are doing just fine in terms of domestic sales. But like you said, with restaurants, the type of food that would have been sold through restaurants that's not being sold today or being sold at a lesser level is certainly a dramatic shift. But you also see that globally, so that's affecting global supply chains. And then you also have, in addition to the coronavirus issue, before we went into coronavirus, the Trump administration had launched a series of trade wars against EU and China. You can argue the merits, whether they were justified or not, but the bottom line was the effect of those trade wars was to reduce ag exports. So U.S. ag exports had fallen precipitously over the last 2 years. We had been shipping $20 billion in agricultural products to China every year, 20 to 23 billion. That number dropped to about 9 billion. So you had lost $11 billion in exports. So you had a situation where ag was already kind of on the ropes and was being supported by these payment programs, the market facilitation payment programs. And then you have coronavirus come in and say, as though it's not bad enough, now we're going to start hitting domestic consumption. We're going to hit restaurants. We're going to screw up the supply chain. So maybe you can't get your product out of ports because there aren't enough container ships. It's really becoming a mess.
Yeah, and Ann, your work with irrigation today, I'm sure you followed the news regarding some of these decisions on the administration and the effects on agriculture. And ag was in a tough spot given the ag economy and the trade challenges that you just mentioned, Brian. Walking into this situation we're in with a global pandemic.
Well, and something that comes to mind, I know at the beginning of this year, there was a phase 1 trade agreement with China that it was always really unclear what was going to happen with that and if China was really going to follow through on maybe what we were hoping they were following through with. Is that now gone up in smoke after all this, or is that still, are we still hopeful that those phases of trade will continue to progress? Do you know anything about that, Brian?
I do. It's something we track pretty closely. So one of the projects that I work on through K-Coe Isom is an organization called Farmers for Free Trade is a client of ours. So we work a lot on trade issues and work with farmers. And what we've seen with phase 1, I think when phase 1 was announced, most people who watch ag were skeptical, like you said. The announcement was that, okay, remember that we'd been shipping about $20 billion in products to China every year. 20 to 23 billion was kind of our mark before the trade war. The claim in phase 1 was that we were going to increase our exports to 40 billion a year. So we were almost going to double our exports. But China was not going to remove most of the tariffs that they had placed on our food in retaliation for us placing tariffs on their goods. And that just didn't really make sense. It was like, how can our stuff be more expensive, yet we're going to sell more of it? The math just didn't work. So I think a lot of people were skeptical about phase 1 to begin with. Then you had coronavirus go on top of it, which obviously disrupted the Chinese economy in a very big way. I saw that it contracted pretty significantly for the quarter. So I think there is concern that we're not on track for phase 1 or not even on track to get back to what we were pre-trade war at this point. Now, there are some bright spots. One bright spot is poultry. China had really not been open to U.S. poultry for the most part. Phase one has opened that door some, so there are some poultry exports that are happening, and that's good for folks in that industry. Another bright spot recently has been corn. China has increased some corn purchases, which is good, and so I know the corn industry is hopeful that we're going to see more corn exports. But I think soybeans are not on track. Pork is not on track. Ethanol certainly is not on track. Of course, ethanol is now being hit by global energy crash, where oil is trading at negative prices. I still want to pull up to a gas station and have them pay me to fill my truck. That seems like a really good outcome, but
Well, I feel like I'm young again, where gas is really cheap, but I can't go anywhere. Like,
my teenage drivers are loving it right now.
I'm sure. I think the last time we were south of $1, I was in college. When I left college and got into professionals, when we really started seeing the gas prices shoot up for my demographic. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy out there, Brian, as far as the oil prices go.
It absolutely is. And obviously that's not a good thing for the oil industry. It's not a good thing for the ethanol industry. It is a good thing for consumers, arguably.
Yeah.
But like you said, water everywhere and not a drop to drink. You're sort of at all this gas, but can we go anywhere?
Yeah.
So I think those are the challenges, or some of the challenges that ag is facing. And I think in part because of the trade wars over the last couple of years, we had seen farm bankruptcies increase. We'd also seen just available capital decrease pretty dramatically. Farm debt was up, liquidity was down. And so you had a lot of people who, I think in a normal year, had the coronavirus hit. A farmer can weather a bad year. If you can't weather one bad year, you better not be a farmer, because you're going to get a bad year occasionally. And most farmers feel like, okay, they can weather a bad year, maybe they can weather two, but you start to chain those bad years together and you run out of the capital that you have. You mortgage your house to keep the farm running. You go to the bank and take out every line of credit you can. Eventually, you can't keep running. And I think the scary thing for us looking at agriculture as a whole is farmers were already had gone through their couple bad years when coronavirus hit. And so I think all of the discussion about aid to farmers right now is absolutely needed. I mean, when we talk about and we can get into the details, but the stimulus bill and what Congress is doing to try to flow dollars out to the economy generally, some of which goes to ag, and then some pieces of that specifically to agriculture, those are just so critically important right now.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to get into that in a little bit. And access to capital is a big component and one of the challenges facing the irrigation industry. And you look at the agriculture irrigation manufacturers down to the dealers and then their customers or the growers, and that access to capital to invest in irrigation has been one of the largest challenges facing the irrigation industry in terms of technology adoption, looking at yield increases. You mentioned our joint conservation efforts in the past, saving water, things like that. And I'm sure this is going to take a hit to overall conservation efforts down the road, because right now we're just trying to keep farms viable. So you mentioned the coronavirus bills that went through Congress, and I know you've been following them very closely. I've been following them, not as close as you have, but somewhat. Where do you see are some even opportunities for the ag producers that have been hardest hit within this legislation? And do you think these are enough? Are they going to work?
Well, I don't think they're enough. I think they're better than nothing, clearly. And for many producers, they're going to be a critical lifeline to solvency and to being able to pass the farm on to their kids and to ride through this tough time. There are a number of opportunities. One, which is a very narrow window, is the Paycheck Protection Program. And I say that's a narrow window. Congress had funded it at $349 billion. That money went out the door almost immediately. It ran out last Thursday. Congress is now refunding it at another $310 billion. We expect that will last a matter of days. We think there's enough companies and farmers and others who have applications pending that money will go very fast. So, I think a farmer should look at that program, and if they're interested, they should get their act together and get to their bank immediately, because it's not going to last very long. Beyond that, I think one of the big opportunities is what's called the CFAP, which is the coronavirus food assistance program, I think is maybe the acronym that USDA is using. And those are going to be direct payments out to farmers, really heavy on the livestock side for pork, cattle, dairy, but also for row crops, specialty crops. And those dollars will flow out to farmers and ranchers based on losses. How losses are calculated is still up in the air, but there will be payments coming to help keep people ride through this difficult time. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. And it remains to be seen if the Paycheck Protection Program, widely popular, really diverse constituencies that are using the Paycheck Protection Program. And the fact that farmers are now vying for the same dollars as restaurants and smaller, bed and breakfast type hotels, resort areas. I mean, it's a challenge keeping up with the demand that's occurring right now for that program.
Absolutely. I mean, you think about it, yeah, 349 billion that moved out in a couple of weeks, and now another 310 billion. That's a lot of money. A billion here, a billion there. Soon you're talking real money, right? And so I think, that's kind of incredible. Then the other piece, and this, we actually had a little bit of a victory for ag yesterday that we were very pleased with. In the CARES Act, this was the stimulus bill, the $2 bill that Congress passed 3 weeks ago. There was a program called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, EIDL. We read it at K-Coe Isom. We read that and said, well, clearly our ag clients can apply for this program. It says any business with less than 500 employees can apply. Therefore, ag clients can apply. So we were helping our clients gear up those applications. And SBA put up a website that said, if you're an ag enterprise, you can't participate in this program. We said, well, what is that? Well, it turns out the EIDL program is built on an older program that ag couldn't participate in. And SBA said, well, Congress didn't specifically tell us to open it to ag, so we're going to keep it closed to ag. So we wrote a letter with 30 associations to the Small Business Administration, asked them to change that position. They didn't. We started lobbying Congress, and yesterday the Senate passed a new bill that includes a fix specifically saying to SBA, you got to include ag in this program.
That's great.
So that's a nice win. It's not a huge program. I mean, it offers emergency $10,000 grants to qualifying businesses, and then $15,000 loans. So it's $25,000. But again, for a family that's right up against the edge, that can make the difference, being able to get that amount of money. So I think it's important. Every tool has to be on the workbench.
Brian, something that has come to my mind, in production agriculture, you've got your large corporate farms, and then you've got, the smaller, it's been in the family for multiple generations farmers, and they both operate very differently. I assume those big corporate farms are the ones that supply the cruise ships and the restaurants and the buffets in Vegas with, all the food and vegetables that they need. And maybe more the smaller farmer, doesn't have that quite as big of a scale of operation to supply those kind of organizations. And I'm wondering, who's going to fare better throughout this? Is it going to be the large corporate farms, or is it going to be the small farmer that maybe has their markets cornered a little bit better? What are your thoughts on that? I'm just curious.
Well, so I mean, I was worried, during the trade war. I think anytime you get an economic contraction, it's the little guy that tends to get squeezed. They have the least access to capital. They have the tightest margins by and large. I mean, there are exceptions to that rule, but as a general rule, whereas the large guys tend to have the capital to ride through a bad part, they tend to be more diversified. And so just with the trade wars, I think we've been worried that we were seeing consolidation within the industry, accelerating consolidation. I mean, that's been going on for a while. That's not a new trend, but that the trade wars were accelerating consolidation as smaller people were squeezed and couldn't hold on. And we saw some of that. I mean, Sonny Perdue last year talked about how that was clearly happening in the dairy industry as milk prices were down, and we were seeing smaller dairy producers go out of business at record numbers. So I think that's been a concern pre-coronavirus. I think coronavirus may just accelerate that trend. A lot of people who, had barely been holding on are not going to be able to. And I think that's a real tragedy because, I mean, for those of us in ag, we know it's not a job, right? It's a lifestyle. It's how you raise your family. It's your culture. It's who you are. And when you lose that tie to the land and have to, both spouses take jobs in town, it's not the same. And we're losing something that's very important, I think, to rural America, but America generally. I think these are important pieces for who we are as a people.
And eventually, Brian, our nation and our economy is going to be what it once was. It may take some time, but we'll get there. Capitalism is not going to go away tomorrow. Democracy is not going to go away tomorrow. We will get there past this. Our challenge is to ensure ag survives this so we can once again make sure we have the food, the energy, all the agriculture product that we get to sustain ourselves in a very strong economy. Because if we lose farms now, we're not going to be able to produce the amount that we are going to need when everything is running at full steam like it was last year at this time.
That's absolutely true. Couldn't agree more. And I think, it's important to recognize too, for decades, the U.S. has been the global leader. I mean, we've literally fed the world. We've had the best farmland. We've had the hardest working farmers. We've had the best rule of law, the best infrastructure to get products to ports. I mean, we've had every advantage going for us. I worry that the trade wars have squandered some of that advantage. So they've given Brazil an opportunity to get its feet under it more than it already had, because it's like, hey, China's a big market where you're no longer selling soybeans. Let's double our acreage. Let's really put in more soybeans and let's improve our infrastructure to get those soybeans to port so we can get them to China. And I think, I like to say trade is not a light switch. You don't flip it off, and when you flip it back on, all the furniture is in the same place in the room. No, things have changed. And I worry that at least on the trade front, we've given up some of our market advantage. We've given our competitors a leg. I mean, Canada's wheat exports to China went up 400% in the last 2 years. Why? Because our wheat exports went down, right? China's still buying wheat. They're just buying it from Canada. So the Canadian farmers are selling more wheat. So from a U.S. perspective, I think we got to, at every turn, try to protect our market share. Now, coronavirus is a global disruption. I don't know how much it's going to change balance between, us versus Brazil. I mean, Brazil's going to be fighting coronavirus every bit as much or perhaps worse than we are when we finally learn the real numbers. But I think one bit of optimism that I will come back to in taking off on what you said, John, is this is temporary. You look at the 1918 flu pandemic. Denver closed its restaurants and Denver closed its theaters, and everyone stayed inside. If you were in New York City in 1918, you needed a travel pass to be able to go outside your house and travel, because the flu pandemic was killing people. We got through that. It was a tough couple of years. A lot of people died, a lot of economic disruption, but we came through it. And it's not that we didn't stop going to restaurants. We didn't stop, ultimately the restaurants reopened and the theaters reopened. We'll move through this. And I do think ag will get its feet back under it.
Yeah. And so let's talk about that. And kind of want to end with this quick conversation. Where do you see the future going with ag? I mean, do you see a permanent disruption? Do you see ag coming out of this? I know you said that what we're doing is really not enough. We need to do more to assist ag to get through this, but where do you see things going? And be as optimistic or pessimistic as you like. I mean, I'm somewhere in the middle. It depends on what day of the week, really, and how I wake up in the morning. But ag is resilient, as you mentioned. Right. We need agriculture. It's what our nation is rooted. It's founded upon agriculture. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yes, I agree with you that I always joke if you're not an optimist, you shouldn't be in agriculture, because you kind of have to be, right? Next year is going to be a great harvest. You have to have that mindset or you wouldn't be in this business. And that I think is true. I think we're going through some hard times right now between trade and between coronavirus. These are definitely hard times, but let's think about what we have going for us for a moment. Number one, we still have the great farmland. I mean, we've lost some in the U.S., but man, the Midwest and the Central Valley of California, unlike any other place on earth. we've got rule of law, and that's something I think we should never take for granted. You know, a lot of countries, you can't trust a contract when it's executed. You know, there's bribery, there's extortion, you can't trust that things are enforced in courts. We have a stable system of democracy and a stable rule of law, a good court system that allows a lot of this stuff to happen. I mean, that's kind of the underpinning for all of our markets, is that rule of law. And that's why we got to cling to rule of law so importantly and not let it deteriorate. Technology. I mean, what's happening on food tech and ag tech is just incredible. And I think we're becoming more efficient. Globally, ag is becoming more efficient. But in the US, where we have access to technology, it's really incredible, whether it's, you know, seed technology or whether it's drones, whether it's irrigation technology. I mean, we're making more with less. And I think that bodes really well for our ability to continue feeding the world and continue to be a global leader in food production.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And I mean, you've seen a lot of the technology stuff front and center with Irrigation Today, and the response you've seen from both the readers of the magazine as well as the people that write for it. And that's going to be a huge part of us coming out of these challenges, I feel like.
Oh, I agree. You know, I think, you know, this is an opportunity for people to somewhat change the way they do things. You know, sometimes when there's a big disruption, it's a good opportunity to change things up. And maybe coming out of this, there will be more of these, you know, uses of technology to make you more efficient, so your costs are less to produce even more.
Absolutely. Well, and you can see bright spots all over the place. I mean, you hear ethanol shifting over to creating hand sanitizer, right? And yeah. I was on the phone with a mint farmer from Oregon last week who, similar thing, he's having a hard time. You know, people aren't buying peppermint patties right now, but he's finding that mint is actually an amazing antiviral and antibacterial substance. And so thinking creatively about how can he get that into products, get it on the shelves, or use it for commercial uses at a time when we need antibacterial and antiviral products. So necessity is the mother of invention.
We were putting together a Target order last night. My son wanted to buy some books. So I said, you know what, let's look at Target and you know, put these in our basket. And he's like, okay, Dad, now let's look at candy. What candy is available? Because that's not something we're running out to the grocery store and buying his candy. So we had to put an order for candy in too, to get that fix in us too. So
do it for the mint farmers. We're doing our best. Yeah.
That's right.
Do it for the mint farmers.
So Brian, where can people go to find more about your company? What's your guys' website?
Well, let me give you two websites.
Okay, great.
You can learn about K-Coe Isom at K-Coe.com, which is KCOE.com. And like I said, we're ag consulting and accounting. So any financial need, any business planning need, go to K-Coe.com. You can learn more about the company. And then I also mentioned Farmers for Free Trade, one of our clients that works on trade issues. You can find Farmers for Free Trade at farmersforfreetrade.com.
Good. Well, thank you so much. You showed us your view from your house earlier on before we started recording, and I don't exactly feel sorry for you right now, Brian.
It's as places to be in quarantine go, it's not so bad.
For our viewers, it looks like a postcard with mountains and lake, and
it's good.
Pretty.
I think I may move to Wyoming after this is all said and done. We'll see.
We would welcome you anytime.
Hey, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it. And someday the three of us can meet once again for barbecue in Kansas City, hopefully.
That sounds great. And thanks to both of you for all the great work that you guys do.
You guys doing great. And thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Well, it was a good interview, Ann, with Brian. A lot of great insights on agriculture, you know, what's going on right now with the coronavirus relief packages and the ability for farmers to take advantage of some of them. But, you know, after we were done talking, we stopped recording, and, you know, Brian said, was I too negative there? I think it was a very realistic viewpoint on where ag stands right now.
Absolutely. And, you know, I loved the way he ended with kind of giving us reasons why we can be positive, you know, just because we live in America. Right. Because of agriculture's resilience. And, you know, there is a future out there, and it's it might be a little bumpy for a while, but it will come back. And I appreciate his words on that home front.
Yeah, and his comments on the rule of law, and we have a structure in the United States that works, and regardless of where you lie on the political spectrum, whether you think we're going too far with our public health initiatives or not doing enough with stay-at-home orders, or wherever you land, we're still in that spectrum that works under democracy, right? And I think that everyone, at least I hope to think, everyone is committed to that. And ag is right there. And I think I mentioned earlier on the podcast, our nation is built on agriculture. We're an agrarian society. That's how we started. And that will always be a part of who we are moving forward. And I think he had some very good points. And the Irrigation Association is committed to give ag as much opportunity as possible to succeed both during this pandemic and beyond, because we need ag to be successful as a society. And it's going to have a lot of challenges, as you just mentioned, as he mentioned, it's going to have a lot of challenges. I mean, we see pork processing plants being shut down right now. We see crops laying on the field, not being harvested. It's a sad situation, but we need to pull together and give farmers the chance to succeed, and then help them moving forward, providing them technology in order to be successful after this pandemic is over. So, yeah. So anyway, I really enjoyed the conversation.
100%.
And it's really enjoyed the conversation, and we'll see what comes next in Congress with providing more relief to farmers. I know that Brian mentioned a bill going through the House right now. They're voting on it today. We're recording this on Thursday, the 23rd of April. And it's going to provide a little bit more for agriculture.
Right. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see where that lands.
I know. And yeah, exactly. And then where things move after that with relief packages.
Yeah. Always something new every day. That's for sure.
I know. Well, Ann, it was great talking to you today. Welcome back to the podcast. I already have more ideas of where we can go with our agriculture-focused podcast. It's I think there's a lot of opportunities out there, and this is part of our coronavirus series of podcasts. But I think that hopefully we'll get beyond just focusing on coronavirus and looking more back to ways farmers can be more successful with their water use, with irrigation, water issues facing agriculture, because those are important issues that just don't go away. They're not going to go away. They're going to be around forever. It's just a matter of what is coming to the top right now, and it's coronavirus.
Right. They'll even be more important in the days to come.
Yep. Exactly. Well, thanks, Ann. I appreciate it. This is Bring Our Life.